Over the past couple of weeks, I have been doing a bit of traveling. And as the pattern has been during this year of 2023, it seems that foul weather is the name of the game. It has truly been one of those years when, if you want to ride, you need to learn to like riding in the rain. So far, my trip to Virginia for the Horizons Unlimited meet was marred by the cold and damp, as was my excursion to Ohio to ride the Windy Nine. Then at the end of a few days traveling through northern New England, once again I found myself traveling home in a torrential downpour that caused all of my expensive waterproof gear to finally reach the point of saying no moss. Some may have taken these hints from Mother Nature and called it quits for the year, or at least limited their excursions to short rides during the few sunny windows we have been allotted. But not me, and I'm sure not most of you intrepid motorcycle travelers. As always happens on trips like I have had this year, I started thinking about the reasons why I keep doing this. Why do time after time of getting soaked or being cold or being hot and uncomfortable do I climb back on the bike and do it all over again? In this video, I want to share with you the great event I attended and the roads that I have traveled during the last couple of weeks. But I also want to talk to you about one of the reasons I keep riding and continue to push my comfort zones. I continue to ride so that I remain vulnerable. I know this sounds a little weird, but just stick with me. In the last weeks of September, I once again ventured out to attend the Gathering of the Clams, which is an annual event put on by the Ocean State BMW Riders, that is Rhode Island for the uninitiated. Well, the weather gods gave us a great day on Friday, but Saturday and Sunday would be another story as the remnants of Tropical Storm Ophelia brought non-stop clouds and precipitation. As I saw the forecast, I could have easily bailed, as many did, but I figured, what the hell, I am going to go anyway, and yes, I am still planning on bringing my tent. As it turned out, there were only 3 or 4 of us who had the same idea, and we all ended up in some open-air cabins located at YMCA Camp Fuller, where the event was held. Everyone else was smart enough to get there early and grab one of the limited number of real cabins. All of us who braved the weather still had a great time. We were able to have a bonfire on Friday evening, and the members of the Ocean State BMW Riders took great care of us, especially during the annual Lobster Feast. I will of course be attending this event again next year, but on the way home I had an interesting experience. While the weather was not as bad on Sunday as it had been on Saturday, the skies were still cloudy, temperatures had fallen once the storm had passed, and there was a constant misty drizzle in the air. I stopped about halfway home at a Dunkin' Donuts, surprise, surprise, for a warm cup of joe and, of course, a short break. When I had finished and I was getting ready to remount my bike, a woman who was walking by stopped and stared at me with a very concerned look on her face. "This is not a good day to be riding. Are you going to be okay?" she asked with an equally concerned tone. I responded and smiled and simply said, "Yes, I will be fine. Thanks for asking." We parted at that point, but it took me aback for a second. This was the first time in my riding career that I've had a stranger truly be concerned for my safety. Of course, this woman does not know me, and all she saw was this old gray beard who looked like a drowned puppy. So I get it, but it caused me to pause and think for just a second. Am I really as old as I must look? When I returned home, my wife was away on a trip to Italy, so I had the house and the TV to myself. I was bored with the standard stuff, so I started to scroll through the documentaries on Netflix and found something Kathy and I had watched a while back, but I thought it would be worth revisiting. And that was the presentation of Brene Brown, who is a research professor at the University of Houston. She specializes in studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. Her TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, has more than 60 million views, and this documentary on Netflix expanded on that topic. Of course, as big, tough bikers, guys like me are not vulnerable. We are strong and tough and don't show our emotions. Vulnerability is something for sissies, or at least that is just the bullshit we tell ourselves. In reality, as Brené Brown found during her research, there is no true courage without first allowing yourself to be vulnerable. She says, there is no courage without vulnerability. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's the ability to show up and be seen. It's the ability to be brave when you cannot control the outcome. Being vulnerable is what motorcycling is all about. It is impossible to ride a bike without first allowing yourself to be vulnerable and accepting that you may not always be in control of the outcome. It is my belief that this willingness to allow yourself to be vulnerable is what that sense of freedom we motorcyclists always talk about is derived from. It is not from the wind or the sound of the pipes or from something granted to us by the motorcycle itself. The freedom we feel is solely derived from our acceptance of the potential danger and then swinging a leg over the saddle anyway. In my opinion, all of this comes from our willingness to be vulnerable, even if we don't want to admit it. I am sure that at this point there are some of you who think I am just totally full of it. You think this vulnerability stuff is for the birds, but let me give you another example that is a bit more manly. As I have mentioned before, I spent many years of my life studying the martial arts and even a couple of years fighting full contact. This was way before the MMA was around, and mostly this was in the gym, but it taught me a whole lot. I was never a very good tournament fighter. I was never fast enough to play tag and win, but I was always a very effective counterpuncher. When the rules changed and small taps on the head no longer counted as points towards winning a match, I found that I could absorb or deflect those lighter punches so that I could close the gap and deliver a more devastating body blow or uppercut to the jaw. Back then, I called this learning to like being hit. In order to deliver my punches, I had to stand there and take a few blows from the other fighter. There was no way around it. I was in the ring with another guy who had just as much training as I did, and at some point, I was going to get tagged, usually many times. The only thing I could do was to come to grips with getting hit and learn to draw inner strength from those blows. In my terms, as a younger version of myself, this was learning to like being hit. But in Brené Brown's view, this is allowing yourself to be open and vulnerable. As Professor Brown says, being vulnerable is not a weakness. Admitting our vulnerability allows us to admit our mistakes, imperfections, and fallibility. It is okay to screw up. It is okay to admit that we don't know something or we do not have moral certainty. It is okay to admit that there may be different points of view. As we talked about before, it is especially important as we get older to admit our shortcomings, at least if we want to keep off the list of statistics. I am fallible. I make mistakes, but I'm going to keep working to get better, and I'm going to keep showing up as long as I can. So in the spirit of showing up, after returning from my excursion to Rhode Island, I saw that there were a few days of relative sunshine headed our way. So I decided to take advantage of an offer from our friends to use their condo in New Hampshire. Rather than doing my normal point-to-point tour, this would give me a base to work out of for a few days of riding the great roads in New Hampshire and Maine. Good morning. Coming to you from New Hampshire today. I decided that because Kathy was out on a trip to Italy right now, that I would come up to New Hampshire for a few days and just ride around some of these beautiful roads. So I called my friends who have a little condo up here, and I'm staying here for 3 nights. Said, we're going to go do some of these great roads. Today I'm going to ride over the Kankamagas Highway, and probably up to Mount Washington if it's open. So come along for the ride. Normally during this time of year, the fall foliage season would be well underway. But this year, probably due to the lack of cold temps, the trees were just starting to turn. I was probably a week or so early this year, but none of that mattered. The scenery and the roads were still amazing. On my first day, I would ride some familiar stretches of tarmac, but also I would do something I have never done before. That is climb Mount Washington. Kathy and I have been up this way many times, but because she does not like heights or that the road was closed, I have never ventured to the top. But this is another reason that we keep riding, because we get to go and do things that we've never done before and see places that we have never seen. Along with this first climb, I would also ride Route 118, the Kancamagus Highway, Bear Notch Road, Maine 113, and Hurricane Mountain Road, all before heading back to the condo. All in all, this would be about 220 miles of mostly traffic-free travel. Riding over the Kancamagus Highway is a must-do for anyone traveling to the New England area. It offers breathtaking views and tight hairpin turns, but beware, during leaf peeping season, it can be backed up for miles with literally busloads of sightseers. The Kancamagus, or Route 112, travels about 35 miles through the White Mountains National Forest between the towns of Lincoln and Conway, New Hampshire. I typically get off the Kank at Bear Notch Road, which winds its way down to Route 302, bypassing the congestion of Conway and North Conway. At the intersection of Routes 302 and 16, you can again turn north, heading to Gorham, New Hampshire, and the Mount Washington Auto Road. In the past, Mount Washington was only open to bikes a few days per year, but now they have opened the road up to all traffic anytime the mountain is safe to climb. Mount Washington sits at 6,288 feet and is known for its extreme weather. The highest surface wind speeds, not associated with a tornado, have been clocked at the summit at 231 miles per hour. Along with these high winds, Mount Washington has a record low of negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit that was recorded in 1885. On February 3rd and 4th of 2023, a new U.S. record low wind chill factor of negative 108 degrees Fahrenheit was recorded. Temps on that day were negative 45 degrees Fahrenheit with a wind speed of 100 miles per hour. Luckily, the day that I rode up was calm and sunny with temperatures in the mid-50s. So I decided to do something I've never done before, and that is ride up to the top of Mount Washington, the highest point here in the Northeast, and the place where some of the highest winds and coldest temps have been recorded in the contiguous 48 anyway. So it's fun to come up here. Really slow, kind of windy climb, especially when you get behind a couple of trucks who are afraid to go more than 15 miles an hour. After leaving Mount Washington, I made my way up to Gorham, New Hampshire, and then crossed the border, turning to Maine's Route 113. That is a small two-lane road that travels through another part of the White Mountains National Forest. While riding this beautiful road, I was thinking back to my climb up and down Mount Washington. It reminded me of just how important focus is, not only to riding a motorcycle, but to life in general. For some, like the guys in those big F-250 trucks, the ride up was slow and treacherous because they focused on how narrow the road was and how far down the drop. On the other hand, as a motorcyclist, I have trained myself to look where I want to go rather than where I don't. I try to approach life in much the same way. For example, I could get wrapped up in how someone may or may not like what I had to say about vulnerability, and they may write a bad comment about me. Or I can focus on those that will get something out of this video and how it might help one of them decide to go after a job that they've always wanted, or start their own YouTube channel, or go on that solo road trip they have been reluctant to take. That is what allowing yourself to be vulnerable is about. It is taking the risks and putting yourself out there no matter what the outcome. In other words, focusing on what you want and having the courage to go after it, even if you fail. As Teddy Roosevelt said, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. Making my way back into New Hampshire, I decided to take one of the classic motorcycle roads in the area, Hurricane Mountain Road. Now, I said that Main 113 was narrow. Well, Hurricane Mountain Road is even more so. In fact, in some places, it is difficult for two cars to pass each other. While the road is twisty, undulating, and a blast to ride, you must be careful because at any moment, you can find yourself face to face with an opposing vehicle. On this ride, I followed a couple of other bikers who kind of blocked for me by meeting the oncoming traffic first. Still, it was a great ride down Hurricane Mountain Road. My final leg before heading back to the condo would once again be to traverse the Kankamagas Highway, this time from east to west. What a way to end a great day. Yes, motorcycling can be dangerous and it can be uncomfortable. But allowing yourself to be exposed to the elements, to the potential dangers, and to the repudiation of those who don't understand brings great reward. Embrace the vulnerability and gain freedom. Ride safe, my friends.